Hey everyone! As always in this channel, once finishing the game, let's check the usual topics: the story, gameplay, graphics and music. X Nordics takes place after X 2, Ancient is Vanish. Here we are going to follow Adol when he was around 17 years old, Dogi and Dr Flair, while they are traveling through Obelia Gulf. Their original destination was Celceta, but it wasn't possible because while on this journey, a group of pirates intercept the ship they were sailing on. This is where these pirates noticed that the owner of this boat hired mercenaries, and kinda confused Adol as one of them. Of course, our young hero is well versed on combat, so without issues he's able to beat these pirates and the so-called princess. This is where one of these Normans stops the conflict and tells the princess that our red dude is simply another passenger. Once the pirates apprehend the captain, as he was skipping some previous agreements, the Balta Sea Force put an end to his days. Once on ground, our trio starts to check the area, but little after, Adol hears a strange voice calling for him. After reaching the shore, he gets to see a small seashell. This is where a weird-looking dog gets closer, but the seashell tells our hero that he is able to use the power of mana. Little after this event, the Norman princess appears seeking her rematch, but more Griegers start to appear. Our duo gets down to business and quickly dispatches the enemies. However, by this point our heroine notices that there is something interesting going on with Adol, so once she confirms her suspicions, she is ready to leave, but a surprise! Somehow our duo is unable to get apart, as handcuffs made of mana keep them together. So this is pretty much how this adventure begins. Now Adol and Karja will look for a way to get rid of these shackles, while also searching for Lila, the girl who talks through the seashell. The pace of this story, as many other X games, will move relatively fast, so issues will arise and few moments later our duo starts to move around lifting the curse placed by the Griegers. And while on this journey, Adol gets to reach a mysterious island in the blink of an eye, quite literally, where new skills will help our duo reach new horizons. I will say that I definitely enjoy the pace of this entry, as there are interesting events that put our heroes against the wall, so Adol and Karja will have to hone their skills while also unraveling the truth of all of these conflicts, and a hidden agenda that, while I was kinda expecting it took a different course. Now I will say that this is not a story that wants to keep every turn of event as something unexpected. It gives you little pieces of information here and there, so you can put the puzzle together, but it definitely keeps enough elements for you to enjoy down the line. If you ask me for character development, yeah, it happens along the way. Not just with our duo, but pretty much with everyone around, in a bigger or a smaller degree. And it has an interesting cast of characters. Yeah, probably one or two perhaps appear annoying, but nothing in real detriment of the story. However, what I have to point out, and something I laughed really hard several times, is that for some reason they decided to add a W to certain Nordic stuff. And I had the dumbest of ideas while noticing that most of the characters have some reddish colors in their eyes. Now, just to put things into context, every time I heard Valhalla, yes, you heard me right, not Valhalla, Valhalla, in my head I was going around saying, and bear with me because I am trying my best here, "Well, brothers, fight with honor because we go to the Valhalla." I know it is so dumb, but a part of me wasn't able to take all of this as something serious. So considering all details, I will say Unecht is fair enough. There is a nice story, yeah, predictable but also interesting narrative between lines, similar as what is shown at the very beginning. Gameplay wise, X is a fast action RPG. For this review I am checking hard difficulty, and since the get-go I will say, if you have experience in these kinds of entries and you don't want to feel that you're just mashing buttons, it is always best to set a higher difficulty. That way different mechanics really matter. Whatever the case, as someone who likes to mess between chill turn-based system and action games, I can say it was definitely manageable. In other words, I would have preferred to jump into nightmare difficulty. So just consider your skill as a player and if you want to mash buttons, or learn most of mechanics. The general pace of this game is like, get into your ship, bear with this activity. At first it is slow as heck, but there are some water streams that can be used, and I recommend you to abuse them as much as possible. Otherwise this part of the game can be a bit bothersome. Down the line we can discuss about other activities and naval combat. Whatever the case, you will need your boat to reach new islands. Once on foot, in contrast with previous entries, here you can only use Adol and Karja, both of them with particular skills that can be trained by using them, so you can unlock newer skills and things like that. You can play with both characters in a similar way, or set slight differences. At first there isn't much you can do, but as you progress, you will be able to set particular skills with these orbs, focusing on defense, luck, damage, or perhaps pushing a bit of everything. However, combos will also be affected if you place a particular orb which packs a better punch, but turns a bit slower your attacks. Needless to say that with this you can use each character under specific circumstances, as you can quickly switch between them, so you can use one to deal damage while the other to defend or things like that. In my case, Adol was kinda lucky, while Karja was defense and break, later adding some extra damage with dark orbs. And as previous entries, you will get better equipment as you advance, but you will need some materials here and there, so just keep that in mind. While playing, just beware that if you tend to grab the control, something like that, it may be a bit complicated to go through certain motions, as sometimes you may need to switch between characters or use them together as a form to block specific attacks. At first I had no issues, but as I reach newer areas and of course as the pace of the game turns a bit faster and precise in some ends, you have me grabbing the control something like this. I know it can be confusing and unorthodox for a lot of players, but that is the way in which I was able to keep a faster pace against some bosses. This is what I meant about your skill as a player and the kind of challenge you're looking for. On hard difficulty, I was able to simply mash buttons here and there. It was till way later that some bosses pushed me a bit to better understand these systems. So just for the record, if you want to keep a higher combo, remember that you cannot use the same skill twice, otherwise it resets to 1. In difficult battles this is really useful as you can reduce the amount of points each skill requires to be activated. Once you reach a high combo, you can abuse some skills left and right, and if you block at the right moment against some enemies, you will have the chance to deal a special attack that can deal a lot of damage, or simply reduce the knockback. Through the journey, there is no real need to get really well these mechanics, I will say until you reach some mid-late bosses, but you can always abuse a bit the dual skills to reduce incoming damage, so I believe the game has enough elements for veterans or casuals. My main complaint here is that if one of your characters gets knocked down, you can bring them back with ease. So I don't know, I felt that this could have been executed in a better way, considering that you can revive them, then increase your combo, change characters, and naturally recover your HP through the motions, turning healer items into something trivial. I know I can be a masochist on these kinds of games. That is the reason why I said that for someone like me, Nightmare will have felt a bit better. Then again, this is just if you want to button mash or be precise with your inputs. In any case, I enjoy a lot the different areas. There can be a bit of a backtrack in some islands, but I believe it can be kept to a minimum, unless you're looking for 100% in every island. Then yeah, you will need to check some places at least twice. And there are some bosses that can be like 30-40 levels above, so at least in hard, if you don't want to take a lot of time, try to be somewhere around 20 levels below, in the worst case scenario. If you've played previous entries, you know that there is that one boss that will push you around, and of course it is a sponge of HP. As for the naval encounters, as you gather new crew members you will unlock specific skills, and turn your boat into something comfier, as it will stand more damage, move faster, etc, etc. In general you can trigger battles whenever you want, so you can keep this activity into something minimum, unless then again you want to liberate every single place and unlock the cool colors of your ship. If you want to do that, then yep, I recommend you to look around for every member, and be prepared with a decent number of ammunition and different weapons, otherwise some battles can be a bit slow, but in general this turns into a lot of fun. Yep, at first the challenges are quite trivial, but later I had a blast here. There is an evaluation criteria, but it is rather easy to get S rank, and I recommend to try it to get it, as you will receive the best bonuses at the end of these challenges. With all of this, man, I had a lot of fun playing this game. To me this section gets a 10. There are plenty of mechanics, places to explore, interesting bosses, and the naval combat turns into something satisfying. Few are the things I could negatively point out, but they never really bothered me that much, so it isn't worth rambling around. On the graphics section, I check game performance, aesthetics, glitches and other visual things. This is the PS5 version of the game. It never closed, and I don't remember a point where I felt an annoying drop. These games need to run like butter on bread, otherwise it can be a bit frustrating at times, and in my humble opinion it delivered. Not that I have a really high standard considering that I don't care about a perfect 60 FPS and things like that, but I don't remember something like my experience with Ys 9 on the Switch, where it was more than obvious that it lacked on that department. Now by this point most of you know what's going to be my main issue here. Yep, reuse stuff like there's no tomorrow. Unfortunately the experience can be a bit stagnant as you will see the same enemies over and over and over again. Now, I won't punish this entry that much considering that Falcom isn't a AAA studio, but if they work on these details a bit more, dude, they could definitely deliver better experiences. Another thing to improve are the colors, saturation and details like that, as the game looks a bit washed down. And of course, if you pay decent attention on some things like shadows, you will notice that they are not the best. For example here, I believe it is easy to notice. But other than that, there are interesting dungeons and outlandish areas which are eye-catching, and of course the combat animations are just amazing. Worth mentioning that parts of the scenery while fighting bosses could definitely improve too. Whatever the case in comparison with the previous entry, Falcom improved plenty of things, so an 8 seems fair enough. And last but not least, it's music. If you heard me talk about Falcom, you know that 80 to 90% of their tracks are neoclassic metal. The rest can be some chill piano tracks, electronic or something along those lines. But for Ys games, this is pretty much the standard. However, this doesn't really add something meaningful to this review, so diving a bit deeper into its general execution, at least with the topic at hand, which is about pirates. There are some formulas, let's call them that way, in which you can deliver a nice tune. Now, of course, if you ask me, hey Alex, have you ever been in a pirate ship? Yeah, nah, this is more about the media wave, or what we conceive as pirate tracks, so jumping a bit into music theory, and keeping it short because this is not a channel for such explanations. We could say that a ternary or binary form could be used, so for example, 6/8 or 12/8 could be thrown here. Oftentimes the pirate tracks use a kind of gallop, yes, pretty much the same sound as when a horse is running. And then we can throw certain modes or forms in which all of these gets together. In essence, throw shortened notes and keep a fast pace. For the sake of the example, I know some will remember this track from Donkey Kong Country. Now, if you like to listen to music as much as I do, it is not entirely needed to keep the same pace, but plenty of these tracks are played like that, as it was executed in Dishonored, with a well-known track named The Drunken Sailor. As you can hear, the gallop is there, as well as the previous parts of the execution and etc etc. Okay, once all of that is kinda understood, we cannot lose the essence of neoclassic metal, because this is Ys. And as I have explained in other videos, you can throw classic or baroque approaches. This whole mess sounds like the tracks Brothers' Footsteps on the Island, Violent Warriors, and Those Who Live in the Distant Sea. So I enjoy these kinds of executions. Of course, if well combined, neoclassic metal does wonders in different settings. However, my main complaint in this whole mess is that the tracks are really short, so I would have preferred to have fewer of them, but longer compositions. I would give the soundtrack a 9. X Nordics' final score is an 8.8. For those into fast-paced action RPGs, yep, I definitely recommend it. The game has plenty of amazing executions left and right. Of course, it lacks in some areas, and there is room to improve, but I won't deny that I had a blast playing this game. It's worth saying that if you haven't played this entry, but you plan in the future, maybe you can wait for Ys 10, Proud Nordics. It is supposed to have extra features, quests, skills and bosses. With this, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.